All right, guys. So I got to talk about an IQ dropping segment that I watched on MSNBC featuring Melissa Murray, who is guest hosting for Mehdi Hasan. A show that nobody ever watches. Okay, that guy is super irrelevant. But anyways, again, this segment was almost unbearable to listen to because essentially the argument that they were making in this segment is that women of color or black women that get promoted to positions like CEO, college president, Supreme Court, etc. Black women that get promoted and they move up in society, they're still victims, right? And they're still victims because oftentimes they get moved up and put into situations when the situation is bad or untenable and are expected to make, substantial change. Basically, they're being set up to fail. So essentially the argument here is that even when black women are winning, right? They are getting promoted. They're getting exactly what they say they want. They're still victims, right? There's still some element of victimhood here for black women or so-called women of color, even when they get their way, right? Even when they get into positions of leadership. And I want to play this segment because, again, I just think that this type of stuff is why we will never stop having these conversations because enough will never be enough. These people will never, ever, ever be satisfied. So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll the clip.
History is being made at Harvard. The Ivy League university named its 30th president last week, and the honor went to political scientist Claudine Gay. Well, it is certainly a well-deserved honor, but, and there is a big but to this story, President Gay will take over at Harvard next July, right around the same time that the Supreme Court is poised to overturn the university's longstanding race-conscious admissions policy. This means that Claudine Gay will likely be stepping into a huge legal and political mess as soon as she's sworn in. Now, I feel this so acutely. In 2016, I became the interim dean at Berkeley Law after a major sexual harassment scandal. It was obviously an amazing career opportunity for me, but it was also amazingly fraught with career risks. And I know I'm not alone. For a lot of women, and especially women of color, Claudine Gay's landmark appointment feels a little bit like another case of women getting a much-deserved leadership opportunity, but only in times when their institutions are undergoing some kind of profound crisis. You've obviously heard of the glass ceiling. Well, this is a little bit like a glass cliff. The idea that women get a better chance of breaking through that ceiling only when someone is needed to clean up an intractable mess. The danger, of course, is that in cleaning up the mess, you run the risk of falling off the cliff.
White women and women of color and men of color as well tend to be appointed CEO or head coach to losing teams or to organizations in crisis. And what we further find is that they're often blamed for the crisis that was not of their making, that predated their leadership trajectory, and held to account for the crisis.
So again, this feels like a really vicious feedback loop where women are essentially set up to fail. And when they do fail, critics say, see, should have never had a woman. That's affirmative action at work. We know this phenomenon in real life. We have a sitting member of the Supreme Court, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who herself faces a kind of glass cliff situation. She's the first woman of color, the first black woman, rather, to serve on the high court, but she comes onto the court just as a conservative supermajority is chipping away at civil rights. What is her glass cliff? How does she grapple with this, navigate this in this lifetime appointment?
The irony that she joined the court in the wake of Dobbs during the arguments for the affirmative action cases, the cases before the court on voting on LGBTQ equality and more. And in many ways, she's sort of a singular voice around Blackness on the court right now. It is a burden that no human can bear. It's too much for any singular person's shoulders, but it is exciting to see nonetheless, I have to say.
Yeah. So again, listening to these segments, you really do lose, some IQ points, right? I mean, you lose levels of intelligence because I just don't know how in the world these people manage to just always somehow find a way to play the victim, to pull the victimhood card, even in situations where it's just like you're getting what you want, right? Okay, these so-called women of color being promoted to leadership positions, but you're still complaining, oh, well, these are not the right positions. These are not ideal positions for us because they're coming in at bad times. I'm like, bruh, you're literally complaining about a so-called black woman being named what, the president of Harvard, right? The president of Harvard University. But apparently, that's not super ideal because Harvard is dealing with an affirmative action case. So are you saying that her job is being made harder because she's not going to be able to unfairly discriminate against Asians and whites anymore when it comes to admissions? Right? I don't understand how what that actually really has to do with her job, right? What does the Supreme Court cases have to do with her job as an administrator at that school? Because they should be discriminating against people based off their race when it comes to admissions in the first place. And if that's what she wants to do, then she shouldn't have that job, right? She should not have that job if she believes in discriminating against people based off their race. AKA, if she is a racist, she shouldn't have that job. I think everybody would agree with that if she was white, right? That would be the case. But apparently, because she's not white, apparently, racism is totally fine. Again, somebody tell me, when a company fires a CEO or loses a CEO or whatever, right? In most cases, you're not going to be walking into an ideal situation given the fact that the CEO was fired, right? Now, again, sometimes you have a guy, he'll retire, he'll step down for whatever reason, but, it's not like these positions are only given to black women or women of color or whatever. It's like there are numerous CEO situations, leadership positions that aren't ideal in which, white men, have been appointed to those positions and they're behind the 8-ball. It happens. I mean, you either step up and you deal with it or you don't. If you can't deal with it, if you can't turn it around, then, hey, maybe you shouldn't be CEO. It's really that simple. But no. It's not enough to just, break the glass ceiling. Once the glass ceiling is broken, now they're walking on a glass cliff where, they can easily lose their job because of their color, right? Because they were put into a position to fail. They're set up to fail. And again, it just blows my mind because the examples they use of this is just so dumb. Like, for example, the Ketanji Brown Jackson thing in the Supreme Court. Apparently, she's been set up to fail because a majority of the Supreme Court is conservative, right? And she's dealing with the affirmative action case and the Dobbs case and all this other stuff that's going on. And apparently that's supposed to be so hard and so difficult for her. She's being set up to fail. And I'm like, she only has one vote, right? What are you talking about? It's not even like she's a swing vote. It's not even like she's the vote that is actually going to put the liberals in the majority. No, she's just one vote. Right? She's just one vote. Nobody's blaming her because Dobbs got overturned. Nobody's blaming her because affirmative action might be ruled unconstitutional. Nobody's going to blame her for that and say, oh, that's her fault. Right? Like, what? Like, I don't understand. I really don't. I don't understand. Again, this is just a way to, again, make somebody out to be the victim just because the world hasn't changed because that person was promoted to a certain position. Like they told us would. Right? Like they told us that, oh, Ketanji Brown Jackson being in this position is so important. It's so important for black folks. But at the end of the day, it's not going to change anything. So the excuse for why it's not going to change anything is that, well, she was put in a position to shut up and fail. Right? You got 6 Supreme Court justices that are, conservative. She's been put in a position to fail. And there's so much pressure on her. No, there's not so much pressure on her. If anything, again, if there was a liberal majority, there would be a lot more pressure on her. If anything, right? Because she would be pressured to vote along with the liberals no matter what. In this situation right here, she knows that no matter where she votes, most likely it's not going to matter because she doesn't have the majority because the liberals don't have the majority in the court. Again, it's just amazing. But again, what we do see here, though, is that when you do have certain people that are promoted to certain positions and the first thing you say is, well, they're black or that they're LGBTQ or they're some type of minority or whatever, and you don't actually really just focus on their qualifications and skills, yeah, that is how you end up with people claiming that the person was promoted in the first place because of affirmative action, right? Like, for example, Karine Jean-Pierre, who I think is the most prominent example of affirmative action in this country. When she got promoted to White House press secretary after Jen Psaki stepped down, the first thing they talked about was her skin color and who she likes to sleep with and the fact that she allegedly has a vagina, right? That's what they talked about. That's all they talked about all day long. They didn't talk about her qualifications, you know, the things that actually are relevant to her job. Okay. Nope. They didn't talk about that. They didn't focus on that at all. They focused on simply her race, who she likes to sleep with, and her genitalia. And lo and behold, she gets into her position and she's terrible. She's absolutely terrible at her job. So yeah, I think people are going to say, well, you know, hey, this is what happens when you hire affirmative action folks, right? When all you do is brag about their skin color, their sex, and who they like to sleep with, and then they do bad at their job. Yeah, people are going to look at that and say, yeah, you know, this is why you don't hire these type of people, right? It's really that simple. You setting yourself up to fail, right? All this identity politics, okay, when it comes to promotions, you are the ones that are setting these candidates up to fail, right? Nobody would say that Ketanji Brown Jackson is an affirmative action pick had Biden not come out here and said that I'm going to put a black woman on the court. If he would have just said, I'm putting the most qualified person on the court, and he happened to have chose a black woman, I don't think many people could come out here and really say much about it in regards to him picking her simply because she's a black woman, right? Or her not necessarily being qualified. Same thing with Corinne Jean-Pierre. When these people come out here and they play identity politics and they say that people deserve to get a spot simply because of their race or their, you know, sex or who they like to sleep with, and then they do a bad job, yeah, that's when people are going to have criticism. And they are right to criticize those decisions because it seems to me those decisions weren't made based off actual experience and qualifications. They were made based off wokeness. So again, if you're talking about how these women are being set up to fail, it really comes down to these people who continue to play identity politics and act like that's some type of sort of qualification for having a job when it's not. If you take the identity politics out of it and you stop focusing on the fact that they're a woman or they're black or they're gay or whatever, then there'll be a lot less pressure on them to succeed and you won't have as much criticism when things go wrong. It's really that simple. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a black conservative perspective. Peace.